That's my interpretation of Thelonious Monk's Friday the 13th, which is a song he wrote many years ago. And I took great liberties with it. I think this is an impromptu pop-up spontaneous Funky Friday at 5. And that piece was by Thelonious Monk, and I normally don't play that. I play it about once a year or so. And as it happens, this Friday the 13th, from what I understand, is the only Friday the 13th for 2022, our year. So I thought it would be, what's the word? It would be inconsiderate or missed opportunity to not come on and do something, even if it's playing a little piano or a lot of piano. Hopefully not too much piano, but we'll start talking. I'm going to move my system over here. I wonder if anybody's tuned in. I don't know. It's hard to always know, these things go up and you kind of don't want to make everybody dizzy there. First I'm going to talk about things that are happening. Tonight, if you're in New York City, in about an hour, Jane Lacroix is performing at the wonderful Red Room, which is in the Lower East Side, I think on 4th Street, East 4th and 4th, I think, or 3rd and 3rd, and she's doing her usual stuff that she does with other performers. That's a wonderful room. I've had the opportunity many times to perform with her in that particular room. It's a very speakeasy type room that has a bathtub in the back, and it's very beautiful, and really good people there. And I've heard a lot, again, it's New York City. So when you're there, you get to hear all these poets and just performers, and it has it's an open mic vibe, but people do prepare things. So it's somewhere in between a formal show and an open mic. It's somewhere in the middle there, if I'm describing that correctly. So she's doing that. And then I have a lot of exciting things coming up for the podcast. So next Friday, at this time, the wonderful painter Alexandra Carter and I are going to talk about The Lost Daughter on Netflix, a film by Maggie Gyllenhaal. And we're going to go pretty deep into that film. So if you haven't seen the film, I recommend you watch it first before tuning into our talk about it, our Weeds talk, or our deep dive into it, whatever expressions people are using now. I'm doing a number of recording episodes, and with different upcoming guests, and you do all these things, and I'm trying to write music. I'm almost done with my piano quintet. I have a couple of other unfinished pieces that you kind of, one of these days I'm going to come on here and sort of ask you in the audience to say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we'll fine tune some things, I think. I didn't really know, since this is spontaneous, I'm not exactly what you would call prepared. So I don't want to be boring. So I found this book by Wendy Steiner. Wendy Steiner is a upcoming episode for recording. I don't know when the episode's going to air, but we're going to also a giveaway. We're doing a special giveaway where you contact us with your work, your creations, and we will showcase them. And we hope to get some subscriptions and some contestants, and I'm it's a totally new thing to do for me, and that's ongoing. And there's no, you could call us at any time, if you got something, and send it to us, and we're happy to. And our producer Laurie Strickland reminds me that that's ongoing now. But back to this book, The Real Thing. Now, Wendy Steiner is somebody. Well, I guess I first read her in the 90s because she's written some books, and the books are about kind of changing social mores or feelings or responses to beauty or attractiveness. And so she wrote a book called Venus in Exile in the early 2000s about Venus being banished or something, or Aphrodite and Venus being exiled or banished in some art. But she's also, The Scandal of Pleasure is a book which has the Mapplethorpe cover, the Mapplethorpe flower on the cover. I remember that was in the mid-90s. But what I like about her books is she they're art books, but they're also very that's Farrah Fawcett Major's, and that's, of course, that is a reference to Michelangelo there, and that's a project she did with a sculptor, and so a sculptor wanted to utilize Farrah Fawcett as a subject. She says, "Well, I tell you what, I will only do it if you let me make art and let me be a part of it and do sculpture, something really silly collaboration." And so there's examples like that. And then there's examples of, like, the first thing I showed you was a Latin American conceptual artist who is doing artwork dealing with political prisoners and the dictatorship and sort of people. Of course, there's a big issue of disappearances, especially in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then some things are just portraits, like some things are just different, but they're different artists who are. Anyhow, what I like about her books is that she integrates these examples, like, say, the Farrah Fawcett Project or the Louisiana Prisoners Project, and so the things that are glamorous, things that are less decidedly glamorous, things that are more edgy, things that are very political, things that are more popular, like the Farrah Fawcett, etc. And she puts them all together, and she weaves narratives about what's going on or what is happening in the art world at the particular time in which she's writing. She's also a librettist. She's writing operas, right? And so right now, as we speak, she's working on an opera. And she's in rehearsal, and I don't know any more details about the opera. But there's some Zoom conferences with the composer, and it's very so she's a very, very creative, very talented, thought-provoking, and in some sense, I should say, accurate commentator about some things. So there's that happening. And I really couldn't decide what to discuss today. Do I talk about the snapshot, because my idea of the snapshot? Do I discuss my 70s book? Because it all sort of connects. It all is sort of a piece. And so I am going to try to talk about what I mean when I say snapshot, because I mentioned it several times. And I realize that I'm kind of using it with a little bit of irony, because a snapshot, in the way that I'm using it, can mean something that's really labored and worked over. Like a snapshot could take 12 months or a year, as much as it could take 5 seconds or 5 minutes, if that makes sense. So the important thing about the snapshot as a metaphor is not so much that it's quick or that it's instantaneous, but that it's snapping a shot out of a moment in time, so that you're capturing a moment and you're capturing an era. And there's so many different kinds of snapshots. Like I said, it could be a literal, this is me. Now, our producer, Laurie, did this, I think, very interesting, very good project involving me as a subject. Even if I weren't the subject of it, I would think it was interesting. But this is a picture of me in Times Square. I think it's 1979, I think. And you can see there's Playland is across the street. There's some adult entertainment places like this, the zoo, Swinger Zoo, and the burlesque and all these things. And also, but notice how sparsely, this would have been in the summer. of like 78, 79. So notice how sparsely populated the city is. There's nobody there. And I would have been, when this picture was taken, attending a matinee. The thing is, I don't remember what play. I couldn't tell you. It could have been Amadeus, maybe, or it could have been Equus with Richard Burton. One of those. I don't know. I've written about my playbills and theater, so we go into Neil Simon, all kinds of things. I was seeing something like that. And so I went back to the same location. And Laurie took these photographs of me in the same sort of location. Right? So now see, they built all these things that, they turned me. This is the post Times Square renovation, right? We have all these hotels and these new buildings, often Disney related, I think, that are in great contrast to what had been there, and sort of in a way in argument with and protest at what many people do not like about the Times Square of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? So so this would have been 2016. And then interesting. So these are actually literally snapshots in a way. But the thing about a snapshot is something like, you could have something like this. And you could not know who this person is and just see this, some kid. And I think you could devise a whole short story or a movie about this person. And I do think some artists work that way. They get an idea, or they get it starts with an idea. I think David Lynch talks about having certain textures or effects. Like, he's very interested in textures and things that aren't necessarily a story, necessarily, or not their pre-story, the before story. And so it could be a mood or a dream or something that speaks to him. And that could be the snapshot. And so, or the snapshot could be the finished product. But basically, I'm trying to, when I use that example or use that, I think it's a metaphor, I'm trying to, at one and the same time, encompass the fact that it's a documentation of something. So there is a non-fictional, real life, truthful part of it. This is what these kids did, right? This is what this suburban neighborhood was like. This is what I was doing on this particular day. And I was wearing this Izod shirt, and there were these cabs, and then they're advertising the musical Chicago. And so that's a snapshot of a period. But what's interesting is that it's not just documentation. It's also unreal. It's artificial, because, the word art comes from artificial, actually, in its etymology, meaning not fake in a pejorative sense. It's not a judgment. It means it's sort of something we create, as opposed to just coming to us, or as opposed to just found, like a building is created, or like a house is created, or, well, culture. We're always creating culture, and our cultures many cultures are both good and bad, and there's some cultures that leave something to be desired, and then there are cultures that are a mixture, and some that are evoke, I guess, admiration or aspirational, and it's just anything the human mind, soul, heart can conceive could be made into a snapshot, and that snapshot could speak to future generations who weren't around. So that's the other thing. You're documenting something, right? And when you document something, you're saying, well, this is what it was like to be here, right? And more importantly, this is how I felt about being here, which is going to be different from person to person. And so I actually study a lot of art, not just for this podcast, but for my life. And so right now I'm studying a filmmaker named Mia Hansen-Løve, who is a French filmmaker. And she is, I don't even know how to evoke what she does. I like it so much. I don't even know. I just say recommend, Bergman Island is her latest film with Tim Roth, and which is Ingmar Bergman Island, by the way. And All Is Forgiven is her first film, which is about it's very Brissonian actually. So there's a kind of attention to the moment and detail. And she's totally unafraid of beauty. She carries beauty as far as possible. Like she'll film in a gorge, or two people will be in a gorge and they'll be talking in the gorge, or a family will be having a discussion, and the camera is just so exquisite. And she's making these films, and I've seen every film of hers but her house music film, Eden, which is about a subject I know next to nothing, French house daft punk. And it's about the origin. So that's the film I haven't seen, just because I haven't been able to access it. And it's sort of a musical about that culture, and there's club scenes. And so most of her films are about families and about a lot of films about love. So Goodbye First Love is incredible, about a 15-year-old girl and her 19-year-old boyfriend, and they fight, they come together, and at the end of the film they're in their 20s, and so there's a novelistic quality. And you're seeing people over a longer span of their life, but it's very different, I think, than what streaming does, because streaming does have this kind of episodic character, whereas her films are very unepisodic. They're like a stream of consciousness in that sense. And I love to have her on the show. You know, you kind of get these ideas. I like such and such to be on the show. Will you please be on my show? I often feel like that I would be what's the word? I try to be respectful. You know, that's my approach, and I try to sort of hope for the best, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. So I don't really know much else. So I've been watching those movies, and again, I've seen all the films. And that connects to my cinephile piece, because I wrote this piece, and I want to make a couple things very clear about that piece. And even if you already figured this out, even if this is duh or obvious, just indulge me. There's a lot of things not in that piece. There's good things missing. Okay? I mean, you can't mention everything. Like, so I was looking at the piece and I was thinking, Farrah Fawcett. I was thinking, you know, everything in that piece, the Busby Berkeley musicals, The Last Detail, Cassavetes' Husbands, Rivette, Jean Eustace's The Mother and the Whore, La Maman et le Putain, Marie Minkin, the experimental filmmaker. I can't list everything now that's in there. The Harvey Girls, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, 50s musicals. All of the things that are in that film are things that I would classify as good creations by people from all walks of life and eras, Hollywood and non-Hollywood, you know, American and international. So they have that. They're diverse too. But the other thing is that they're things that they touch here in me most directly and most intensely. So they fit into the category we call love. You love something, which for me is very different than like. Now, like is important, and there's a lot of things that I like that if I talk to you about them, you might think that I love them because I'm so enthusiastic. But they don't get to the love, they don't get up to a love level. They're still like. Just because they're not favorites, or just because they're not as influential. But all the things in this piece, the cinephile, are things that just, I mean, blow up. The Antonioni's blow up. David Hemmings, you know, I have a whole book about the film over there. You know, Smokey and the Bandit. I don't know. These sex symbols of the 70s and 80s, some 80s, not mostly 60s and 70s, right? Ursula Andress and Raquel Welch, and et cetera, and all these things. I mean, they're things that I love, and I'm aware that, you know, when you talk about love, as I said in the last stream, you know, it's very hard to talk about love because, you know, your articulation of your love for something will never match the love. because you feel like you can never do justice to it because you love it. There's sort of a gap there. And so you do your best, you try to write your best sentence or compose your best piece of music that you could compose or perform. And then you have to finish. You have to close the door, as Teddy Pendergrass said, right? You gotta close the door and have something, a finished work with a period on it, with a, the chord, and be done with it. And hopefully it works. And I kind of think that's one way of looking at everything on our podcast, whatever it is. So when I'm getting ready for Wendy Steiner, Wendy Steiner is entering my consciousness. And the phrase I like to use is she's entering my nervous system. So my nervous system is being invaded by Wendy Steiner's knowledge and her learning. A person I've never met. I've never met Mia Hansen-Love. I've just seen videos of her talk at Lincoln Center talking about working with Isabelle Huppert. That film, see, she makes films about intellectuals. So she actually made a movie where the main character is a philosophy professor, played by Isabelle Huppert. I mean, that's something I love. I mean, the characters talk about Kant and Hannah Arendt. I'm thinking nobody makes movies about these people. And these people, to me, are what they do is valuable. Philosophy professors, and also what they read. Not only is what they do valuable, but it's disparaged by a lot of the world who think that what they do is at worst meaningless, at best I don't know, just not as important as STEM. Because I just watched a video with Azar Nafizi, and somebody asked Azar Nafizi, "What do you think about STEM, science and technology?" And it's like Easy said, "Oh, I'm against STEM. I'm opposed to it." I mean, she's being hyperbolic, right? Because of course you got to teach math and statistics, right, and science. It's important, but she's kind of, because her thing is, her thing is James Baldwin and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Emily Dickinson, and that's her thing. It's not, The Lives of the Cell necessarily. Oh, that's a wonderful book, Lewis Thomas, The Lives of the Cell. Or it's not microbiology or debates about vaccinations. It's art. So that's the point of my show. But what I'm saying is, when I get deeply involved in Mia Hansen-Love, Wendy Steiner, it's entering my nervous system, and so what's happening is it's rewiring my nervous system, so that I am completely convinced that I'm being changed by it. I'm also convinced it's welcome. So there's something, I know something now that I did not know before. It's secondary what that thing is. It could be something about people usually, or something like these French films I've been watching. I'm learning an enormous amount about French culture, of course, because it's steeped in that, and but also about their family life and how they organize their lives, which is very different than my own experience. So a thing about a snapshot is a snapshot could communicate something I don't know. I actually want to encounter things I don't know very well. I want to learn new things. I want to learn new things every day. And one way to do that is, of course, art. Because I feel like if these things enter my nervous system, now I have to make very clear, some people shouldn't do what I do necessarily, because sometimes things can enter people's nervous systems, and it enters, I imagine it enters in a way that's probably too tumultuous, or maybe it's too direct, and then it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And I'm not even sure if my metaphor will work with other people. That's just how it feels to me, because it feels like something that's happening all inside of me, and it's not any particular thing. It's not particularly the head or the heart, or the feet. It's like, and it might be, I think it's connected to empathy, but, again, the English language is good. It's great, but it's the English language can't do everything. And it's not exhaustible or exhaustive, of trying to talk about things like what you love, right? So I brought a whole pile of books here that I might have talked about, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to be boring or wear out my welcome. I think I played too long on the piano. I hope I didn't, but it took the form that it did. And so on this Friday the 13th, or only Friday the 13th for 2022, I just want to say that I hope your day does not live up to the superstitions of the day, or what I should call the folklore of the day, which is most likely false, perhaps. I don't know. That's not my field of study. And I hope you tune in next Friday for Alexandra Carter and The Lost Daughter. We're not showing the film The Lost Daughter. We're talking about it. Although I'd love to do a director's commentary type audio commentary someday for a movie. I'd like to do it on here and show the film here. I have films I'd love to do that with. It'd be great. So I think that's everything. So I'll say goodbye. Have a good weekend, a decent weekend, and I'll see you soon.